Joining me now is Alex Newman. He was a part of our National Worldview Weekend, our 22nd annual Worldview Weekend just a few weeks ago. All of those presentations are now in the vault for Vault members, worldviewtube.com/vault. Big news here with Alex. He has done a lot of studying as to what's going on in Venezuela. You know, a few years ago, the then CIA director, Mike Pompeo, told Chris Wallace on Fox News that China is in Venezuela and Russia and Hezbollah, lots of bad dudes in Venezuela. One of the leaders, I think it was of Southcom, warned that China is in our backyard because of, well, like Argentina, Venezuela. What is going on in Venezuela? You know, we go back, I think, 2008, 2009 in our vault. You'll see me warning about missiles in northern Venezuela, Caracas, about 1,264 miles as the crow flies from northern Venezuela, Caracas, to Miami. And I was warning back in 2008, 2009, 2010, somewhere in there in the vault, you'll find it. I'm talking about it over and over. That if we don't pay attention to Venezuela, we might end up seeing them as another Cuban Missile Crisis. We know planes have been flown in repeatedly from Iran over the years into northern Caracas, or northern Venezuela near Caracas. What is going on? What are they doing? What does Alex Newman know about this? Someone that spent a lot of time being raised in South America. He joins us tonight. Alex, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me, Brandon.
All right. Well, I'm just going to let you jump off of all the questions I just asked.
Well, this is a huge story. It's actually a story that's near and dear to my heart. As you mentioned, Brandon, I grew up in Latin America. I've lived most of my life in Latin America. I lived in Mexico. I lived in Brazil. I lived in South America. I'd been all over the place, and I've been back many, many times since then. And it's a story that I've been covering for 15 years, my entire career in journalism, because it's near and dear to my heart and because it's so important to what's happening in the United States of America. So I want to start off by saying that Venezuela itself is not the problem, right? Nicolas Maduro is a thug, he's a gangster, he's a communist, he's a terrorist, he's a brutal dictator, totally illegitimate. But on his own, he's nothing, right? He's absolutely nothing. His military is a joke. The United States could destroy it with virtually no effort. So I want to be clear out the gate that Venezuela itself is not the problem. Venezuela is a tentacle of a massive beast that now, unfortunately, has the United States in its grasp. And I'll start going back in time a little bit. In 1990, there was an organization that was formed, really an alliance, an umbrella organization. It was formed in São Paulo in the year 1990, called in English the São Paulo Forum. In Portuguese, the Foro de São Paulo. In Spanish, el Foro de São Pablo. And this was founded by Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, the Marxist wannabe dictator of Brazil, Fidel Castro, the mass-murdering dictator of Cuba, the Sandinistas, the mass-murdering communist terrorists in Nicaragua, and, of course, the FARC, the mass-murdering communist narco-terrorists in Colombia. In English, it would be the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. For 50 years, these barbarians bombed and murdered and tortured civilians, children, absolutely grotesque organization, and they funded their activities through drug trafficking into the United States and other extortion, kidnapping, things like this. So this group came together, and their goal was, as they actually explained in 1997 at their meeting, to reclaim and regain in Latin America what had been lost in Eastern Europe. At that point, you know, the Iron Curtain was coming down around 1990. They wanted to rebuild communism and fortify it in Latin America. And so this alliance brought together political parties, social movements, terrorist organizations. FARC is just one of many terrorist organizations, drug trafficking organizations involved, and, of course, governments. Cuba, obviously, was hugely significant, the Workers' Party in Brazil. And what they are dedicated to is taking over the entire region for communism. Now, it's even worse than just Latin America, because the Russians have been deeply involved from the beginning, and the Communist Chinese have been deeply involved from the beginning. And I've reported all this at the New American Magazine. Very, very few other sources have reported this like we have. But even in 2014, I did a big article about Putin and Xi Jinping in Latin America. They were doing a tour of Latin America where they were openly calling for unification of Latin America, ideological conformity with these communist goals for a new world order. And so what people need to understand is this network, which is deeply, as you said, Hezbollah is there, Iran is there. Basically every anti-American organization, movement, government, dictator, terrorist organization that you can think of is involved in this. And they are working not just to enslave all of Latin America, but the big prize, of course, is to bring down the United States of America. Barack Obama Joe Biden, subversive elements of our Central Intelligence Agency, George Soros, and a whole bunch of other nefarious actors, very much including the Council on Foreign Relations, have been aiding and abetting this network for decades, okay? And it's at the point where Julia Swig, who was the director of Latin American Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, open Castro apologist, bootlicker for the revolution. She was the David and Nelson Rockefeller Fellow for Latin American Studies at the CFR. So this is a massively powerful movement. After Obama and Biden were able to open up the borders, they flooded this country with their intelligence agents, with their terrorists, with their military operatives, with their special forces. They are positioned all over the country. And by the way, it's almost impossible to determine where the governments end and the drug cartels begin. And Venezuela is a perfect example of this. El Cartel de los Soles, one of the most powerful, wealthy cartels in the world, is essentially the Venezuelan government, right? They fly their drugs in on Venezuelan government planes, military planes. The intelligence agencies are all involved. It is a massive moneymaker. And so what they do with all this money from the drug trafficking, from the oil, and from everything else is they rig elections in other countries, they foment revolution, they buy weapons for terrorist organizations. And again, they are in our backyard, literally in our country at this point, and very, very few people, unfortunately, are paying attention.
So this is why President Trump is bombing these boats, which I have no problem with. I know some people, are worried about the constitutionality of it and whatnot, but I think since Thomas Jefferson, we've been going after people on the high seas that are coming against the country, right? So I'm not sure I have a big of a problem with it, but this seems to be really the goal is giving a warning to Venezuela and moving in quicker. And now we're hearing, of course, about the U.S. moving more and more into the area, into the region to maybe do something. We're even reading about, here we go, the headline here from this network that we're getting a base in Puerto Rico. And maybe, again, this is all getting ready to move against Venezuela. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, there are huge amounts of military assets being positioned. We've got a giant aircraft carrier off the coast there now. We've got thousands of troops at the ready. Leaked information, I have not been able to verify it, but the president has authorized CIA activities in Venezuela. I wouldn't trust the CIA as far as I could throw them. And by the way, if you talk to the good guys within the CIA, they'll tell you the same thing. There is some nefarious stuff going on in the CIA. CIA has known all about this. So has the Department of State all this time. And for whatever reason, they've either done nothing or they've helped this network take over more and more of Latin America. So I think Donald Trump and some of his key people have a good understanding of what's going on there. I have absolute confidence that Pete Hegseth is the right man for the job. I will say off the gate, I am not a guy who likes war. In fact, if anybody who knows me or has followed my work for the last 15 years know I'm about as anti-war as they come. And I don't want war here. I don't think war is the solution. However, they have already declared war on us. That's the thing that we're not understanding here. They are in a war against us with the communist Chinese and the Russians and the communist networks in Latin America. They are already waging war on us. So I would like to find a peaceable solution to this where Donald Trump makes it clear to them that these kinds of activities are not going to be tolerated. These things are going to be dismantled immediately or there are going to be consequences. I do think Congress needs to get involved. I like President Trump. I agree with a lot of what he has done. But I think our Constitution is very clear. War requires a declaration of war. We need our lawmakers, our elected representatives, to have a sense of what's going on and to have an opportunity to weigh in here. I do not want war, to be clear. However, if it comes to it, it would be very wise for the administration to be prepared. And right now, when you look at what's happening with Russia, when you look at what's happening with China, when you look at the role of Venezuela in all of this, I'm afraid that we may be marching inexorably to war. And the Trump administration needs to take steps, prudent steps and precautions to make sure that we are prepared for whatever these evildoers, whatever these networks may be preparing for us.
Remember several years ago, we were reading articles about terrorists here in the U.S., domestic terrorists here in the U.S. going to Venezuela for training on Molotov cocktails and shooting and all kinds of stuff. I think there was even a big article in the Daily Mail UK about this that we reported on. I want to say around, the 2009-10 era. Do you remember that?
Brandon, they don't even hide this anymore. The leaders of the burn, loot, and murder, the Black Lives Matter movement, were down in Venezuela. They put pictures of themselves hugging the mass murdering dictator Nicolas Maduro and posting on X that, oh, it's so great to be in a country with intelligent political discourse, like the kind where we torture and arrest our political opponents. That's the level of brazenness that we're dealing with here. We have terrorist movements in the United States openly going to Venezuela, openly going to Cuba, cavorting with mass murderers who fully believe in destroying our country. And I'll say this too, Brandon, this is not a new problem. Okay, this has been going on for decades. Go back to the 1960s and the 1970s when we had the Weather Underground maniacs blowing up bombs. They bombed the Capitol building, they bombed the State Department, they bombed the Pentagon, they murdered police officers in this country, and then they bombed the funerals of these police officers. They were working very closely, by the way, with the DGI, with Communist Cuban Intelligence, which is essentially a proxy for the Soviet Union, which, by the way, the same people running the Soviet Union are still running Russia today. Don't believe the propaganda about Putin being some kind of Christian, whatever. It's nonsense. It's the same people that were running the KGB. Now, the same agenda is still at work today. Now, there's different people, right? Weather Underground was founded by Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers, of course, was prosecuted. He got off on a technicality, bragged about it, said, you know, he was guilty as all get out. He went into education, of course. But I want to remind people of a couple of things here. The FBI infiltrated the leadership of the Weather Underground, which, again, a terrorist organization working with hostile communist foreign powers to bomb targets in the United States and collapse our government. The guy who infiltrated the leadership of the Weather Underground for the FBI, Larry Grathwohl, did some interviews before he passed away where he laid it all out. He said the leadership of the Weather Underground was preparing to foment a revolution in this country, and their plan was, and he articulates this, anybody can go watch this interview, they were going to invite hostile communist foreign powers into our country to occupy different parts of the country. The communist Chinese, the North Koreans, the Soviets, the Cubans, etc. Everybody was going to get their own little piece of the country to occupy. And they were going to build, he said, a network of re-education camps across the American Southwest where they were going to put counter-revolutionary Americans, which would, of course, include you and me and anybody else with two brain cells to rub together that doesn't believe in satanic, murderous Marxism. And he asked them, well, what do we do with the Americans who are just, you know, counter-revolutionaries to the core and can't be brought into the new way of thinking? And the leaders of this terrorist movement told him the plan is we're going to liquidate them. They estimated that they'd have to liquidate, I think, about 25 million Americans, which is about 10% of the population at that time. Now, different faces, but I want to remind people, Barack Hussein Obama was nobody. He was a community organizer until he launched his campaign for state senate in Illinois. And for those who don't remember, he launched his campaign for senate in Illinois in the home of Bill Ayers, the founder of the terrorist organization that was working with the Cuban government to bomb targets in the United States and overthrow our government. They failed in the 60s and 70s. America was not ready for the revolution, but this is a very different world now. We've had years of open borders. We've got assets positioned all across our country, sleeper cells, saboteurs, assassins, gangsters, you name it, all taking orders from these criminals. And folks, code red. You know, and I'm not saying this to scare anybody. We should not be fearful. God did not give us a spirit of fear, but we need to understand what we're up against. Venezuela is one tentacle on a giant monster that has its tentacles wrapped around our country. And if we don't deal with it, it's going to mean big problems for our country.
All right, look at this. One battle after another is still a box office bomb, but it's also a beacon of light in the darkness. Well, that was the headline. This is Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't know if you know anything about the movie, but it is basically a modern day Weather Underground bombing, cultural, Marxist, full out Marxist, going after ICE and trying to free illegal aliens and bombing their centers to get them out, get them free, etc. War with the government. Did you know that was in the theaters a few weeks ago? It bombed, by the way, here. Pardon the pun. Did you know about that?
I did hear about that. And Brandon, there's something else too. The president of Colombia, Petro, who's, by the way, through and through communist, Barack Obama and George Soros helped hand FARC Colombia, literally, and I've done some very important reporting on that at the New American. He was in our country for the UN summit just a few weeks ago, publicly saying American troops do not obey orders from your commander-in-chief. You need to side with humanity, not with President Trump. They know something big is coming, and they're already encouraging our soldiers not to obey their leadership, but to side with, quote unquote, humanity, by which they mean the Marxist revolution. So,
and
folks,
obviously the Trump administration knows something is coming, and you can see it in several things that are going on. Not only are they apparently trying to find out who these gangs are, Tren de Aragua, and all these other gangs, Sinaloa, get to the heart of this, but they are ramping up their National Guard response teams to be ready in all 50 states from April of 2026 to January 1 of 2026. So they must anticipate that the domestic terrorists, while we were being told we were the domestic terrorists, the Christians, the conservatives, the patriots, the pro-lifers, the MAGA, the America First, that was all a distraction while they flooded our country during the Biden regime with the real terrorists who are still here, many of them. They're trying, I think, to get them out, find out who they are, who the leaders are, but prepare for something I think they know is already coming that they can't stop, whether that's Al-Qaeda, the bin Laden boys, or what's coming, depending on who you're listening to. But these groups are all networked and working together with the red-green axis, the red being the Marxist, the green being the Islamist. I always explain that for new people. But if you go back and you read the Weather Underground's manifesto, their Prairie Fire from 1973, 74, somewhere in there, it's in my library bookshelf right over here. It reads like today. It's anti-Israel. It is pro-Mao, Chinese Mao, communist Mao. It is pro-Palestinian. It is anti-capitalist. I mean, it reads like today, the need for the red-green axis. And I want to go back to what you mentioned. I had the chance to interview Larry Grothwald before he died. It's in the vault, folks, for those of them who are members at worldviewtube.com/vault. But Alex brought it up, and he's trying to show you how all these groups are working together. This is Larry Grothwald himself when he penetrated them underground, first for the law enforcement in Ohio, and then for the FBI, when the FBI used to be able to go after these groups prior to U.S. Senator Church of Idaho neutering the FBI. Listen to this. Here's what Alex was referring to. Is there any audio on that, guys? Yeah, there is. It's my fault. Hang on. Here we go.
I brought up the subject of what's going to happen after we take over the government. We become responsible then for administrating, 250 million people. And there was no answers. No one had given any thought to economics. How are you going to clothe and feed these people? The only thing that I could get was that they expected that the Cubans and the North Vietnamese and the Chinese and the Russians would all want to occupy different portions of the United States. They also believed that their immediate responsibility would be to protect against what they called the counter-revolution. And they felt that this counter-revolution could best be guarded against by creating and establishing re-education centers in the Southwest, where we would take all the people who needed to be re-educated into the new way of thinking and teach them how things were going to be. I ask, well, what is going to happen to those people that we can't re-educate, that are die-hard capitalists? And the reply was that they'd have to be eliminated. And when I pursued this further, they estimated that they would have to eliminate 25 million people in these re-education centers. And when I say eliminate, I mean kill. 25 million people. I want you to imagine sitting in a room with 25 people, most of which have graduate degrees from Colombian and other well-known educational centers, and hear them figuring out the logistics for the elimination of 25 million people. And they were dead serious.
Yeah, they were dead serious. And I interviewed him again. It's at worldviewtube.com/vault. Just type in Larry Grothwald. So this is who they're working with. These are the people that the modern day Marxist and Islamist are working with. Remember, the head of CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations, which, of course, comes from Muslim Brotherhood, which gave birth to Hamas in 87, which are here in the country. They just arrested, by the way, a guy in Louisiana who took part in the terrorist attack of October 7th in Israel. They arrested him in the U.S. Some of those people are here ready to do October 7th in America, believe you me. But remember the head of CARE, who's tied back to Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood through that line, said Black Lives Matter is our matter. Black Lives Matter is our campaign. The Islamists and the Marxists are united. I want you to comment on this. Here is back in our vault, my radio show from December 13th, 2010. December 13th, 2010. Okay. Look at what we've got here. We're talking about Iran places long-range missiles in Venezuela. Venezuela acquires 1,800 aircraft missiles from Russia. Okay. That was in 2010. Here's another one. This is from an article on our website in 2013. And what's very interesting, I'll do the old Control F. There it is, Venezuela. Admiral Lyons. Admiral Lyons was a highly decorated. You knew him, didn't you? Admiral Lyons.
I did, yes.
Tell our audience how credible he is before I tell you what he said.
Incredible military leader, one of the greatest men of the modern era in terms of understanding what was really going on.
Yeah, well, here's what he said from 2013 when he was asked about Venezuela. He said that Venezuela, let me do the old Control F on Venezuela again and grab it, Venezuela. He was warning that they're in our backyard. He said, here's what he said. We have Iranian operational missile bases today in Venezuela, fully operational. They've been able to accomplish what the Soviet Union tried to do in Cuba in '62. We have cities in the United States today which are under the threat of those missiles that are in Venezuela. It needs to be addressed. In fact, they should be forced out of there post haste. Either take them out or we'll take them out. I don't see that happening. Now, again, this was by Admiral Ace Lyons. It was on our website back in 2013. You want to comment on these two things?
He was exactly right then, and the problem has only gotten much, much, much worse since then. Barack Obama, as I mentioned, deliberately aided and abetted this network. I mean, it was at the point, Brandon, where they were openly intervening on behalf of key operatives for the São Paulo Forum. If you look, for example, in Central America, when one of their FSP members was being ousted because he was a criminal, the Obama administration openly intervened and said, you must restore him to power. Manuel Zelaya in Honduras. We saw Barack Obama openly praising and promoting Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in Brazil as the most popular leader in the world. This is a guy who was convicted for his role in Operation Lava Jato, which was the operation that uncovered the crime spree. They were basically looting public coffers and using that money, not just to build themselves nice houses and things like that, but to get communists and socialists and revolutionaries elected in other countries. So Obama aided and abetted this. The problem is much worse today than it was in 2013. And unfortunately, we are in a worse situation today when it comes to being able to deal with it because we have been economically weakened, we've been militarily weakened, and I don't think you can understand any of this without understanding what Soviet defectors started warning us about in the 1980s, about the long-range disinformation plan, that they were going to have a phony collapse of the Soviet Union, that by the time this was all over, by the time they had weakened America enough, they were going to bring about what this whistleblower Anatoly Golitsyn described as a second October revolution, where the communists in Moscow, the communists in Beijing, and their communist allies around the world, cooperating closely, of course, with the Islamists and Iran and others, were going to try to basically bring the entire world under the control of this international network. And the one piece of the puzzle that people are missing, you know, when we talk about the red-green axis, I add to that the blue element of it, which is the globalists. They're all working together. George Soros has been a key enabler of all this. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, all these people have been key enablers of this. So you've got the globalists, the Islamists, and the communists marching in lockstep against the last bastion of liberty and Christian civilization, and that's what's left of the United States of America.
Oh, look at this. The Trump administration is preparing a new mission in Mexico to target drug cartels, according to NBC News. The plan involves deploying American troops and intelligence officers to strike drug labs and cartel leaders inside Mexico. How close is Mexico working with Venezuela? And you believe these governments are basically narco drug states, both Mexico and Venezuela, right?
There's no question about it, Brandon. Everybody knows this. And I want to be clear here. There's a little caveat. Not every government official who works with these cartels is necessarily willingly doing it. You know, in Mexico, and again, I spent 7 years in Mexico. I lived more time in Mexico than any other place in the world. I've gone back many times since. I have a lot of friends and contacts down there still. They have a saying down there. It's called plomo o plata. In other words, plomo is lead, plata is silver, is what it means, money. And so they go to these judges, these police chiefs, these senators, these politicians, and they say, look, you can have plomo or you can have plata. In other words, we'll either murder you and your family, we'll shoot up your house and kill you all, or you can have $100,000 dropped into an anonymous bank account, and you can use it for whatever you like.
So
and
lead,
for a lot of people,
lead or silver, that's the saying?
That's right, plomo o plata, lead or silver, lead or money.
The lead being the lead bullet. So you can take the bullet or you can take the money. And a lot of them, of course,
and for a lot of them, they know it's true, Brandon. I mean, they see their mayor hung, headless from a bridge. They know if I don't cooperate with these guys, they're going to kill me and my family too.
Well, how many of them did we just see one elected and his head ended up chopped off on the top of his own car?
Yeah, and that's routine in Mexico. And this is the problem we're dealing with. We're dealing with satanic evil.
Okay, so in the last 3 minutes I have, how concerned are you then that Iran is working with the drug cartels in Mexico? Again, I've talked about it for a few years, and that is all the drug tunnels between Mexico and the United States that, again, Todd Bensman has said, look, these drug cartels, they're about money. So if they get as much or more money smuggling people for sex trafficking, because you can use a drug up one time, sex trafficking pays over and over, or taking money from the Iran to help build their tunnels to smuggle bioweapons or small nukes or other things through, they'll do it. You know, they're all about the money. How concerned are you that the drug cartels are working with the Islamists and that they are actively still infiltrating America? We just found another tunnel here recently, in the last few weeks, we've reported on it coming into the U.S. How concerned? I mean, you think about things like the Tom Clancy movies, right? And you're thinking Clancy was writing a lot of this stuff based on reality, not just fiction.
Yeah, and I'm extremely concerned, Brandon, and anybody who understands what's going on is extremely concerned. And the reality is this is about more than just money. The money is the means to an end. Yes, the cartel doofuses get to have nice houses and fancy cars and gold-plated AK-47s, but the real reason that they're after this money, through the drug trafficking, through the human trafficking, through the oil, through the money that they're looting from state-owned enterprises across Latin America, is not so that they can live in big mansions. It's so that they can enslave humanity under this system and bring down the United States of America. We need to stop thinking of the cartels as just criminal organizations. They are criminal organizations that are tentacles on a much bigger beast with the objective not of making money. Right? It's not just about making money. It's about funding the revolution that they hope will eventually bring down our country.
And some of the globalists are using them as the junkyard dogs to destabilize the Western societies, right?
Oh, yeah. And they use them for assassinations. You know, you have a problematic person. You have a cartel hitman go take them out. It was a drug dispute. Nobody even understands that this was a political hit because somebody was standing in the way.
Attempted carjacking, right?
Yep. It's so routine, and it happens now all over the world. Criminals do the dirty work for the establishment.
So how happy are you with the Trump administration? I mean, there's some areas where I'm a little concerned, but overall, I'm pretty happy, particularly considering what would have been the alternative, right? So how happy are you with the Trump administration?
I'm very pleased that the Trump administration is taking this seriously. He's got a lot of good guys working for him on these issues. I'm grateful for that. This is a huge problem. I think he needs to go to the American people and to Congress with this so that people have an understanding of what we're dealing with, and I think he needs to do it now.
So you think that's why these national strike forces are being stood up much quicker?
100%.
So they know something's in the wind.
Absolutely, they do.
And you're preparing your family accordingly, aren't you?
I am. And I would urge everyone else to do the same.
And I am as well. LibertySentinel.org, LibertySentinel.org. Check it out. We also carry his broadcast on the weekends, don't we, guys? Yep, we do. They're telling me at worldviewtube.com. And you can pick up all of his writings and everything at LibertySentinel.org. As always, Alex, thank you for making time for us.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Really appreciate it.
Alex Newman checking in, LibertySentinel.org.